I received letters from the bank about properties I supposedly bought, but I've never purchased anything. My daughter-in-law says it's a bank error, but there are already 5 properties in my name worth over $1.4 million. So I secretly hired a lawyer, and what she discovered left me terrified. Thank you for being here as I share the darkest chapter of my life. Drop a comment with where and when you're watching. Your support means everything to an old man who almost lost it all. My name is Harold Peterson, and at 68 years old, I thought I knew everything there was to know about my quiet life in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I was wrong. It all started on a Tuesday morning in early October, the kind of crisp day that makes you grateful for small-town living. The October air carried the scent of burning leaves when Sam Wilson's mail truck pulled into my driveway earlier than usual. I was tending Martha's rose bushes, the ones she'd planted 37 years ago when we first bought this house on Oak Street. "Morning, Harold," Sam called, waving a thick envelope. "Certified mail for you." My stomach tightened. In all my years, certified mail never brought good news. I signed for the envelope from First Community Bank of Iowa, where I'd banked for 3 decades. Inside, using Martha's silver letter opener, I found a document congratulating me on acquiring a commercial property on Riverside Drive valued at $320,000. I read it 3 times. It made no sense. I had never bought any property on Riverside Drive. The only real estate I owned was this house paid off 15 years ago with Martha's careful budgeting and my steady work at the grain elevator. I dialed the bank immediately. After navigating automated menus, a voice answered, "First Community Bank, this is Jennifer. This is Harold Peterson. I received a letter about a property purchase, but there's been a mistake. I never bought any commercial property." Typing sounds. "Let me transfer you to commercial loans." After more hold music, commercial loans. "This is Brad. I see you're calling about Riverside Drive, Mr. Peterson. Our records show you signed documents on September 15th. I did no such thing. I haven't signed anything nor been to your bank in September. Sir, all documentation is in order. Perhaps you'd like to speak with your daughter-in-law. Lindsay Peterson works in our loan processing department. She could help clarify any confusion." I hung up before he finished. Lindsay, Robert's wife of 6 years. Always helpful, perhaps too helpful. She'd encouraged me to update my banking after Martha passed. Helped set up online access, offered assistance with paperwork during my adjustment to widowhood. But I hadn't needed help. Martha taught me to keep meticulous records. Every document filed perfectly in the oak cabinet she'd bought at an estate sale. I walked to that cabinet and pulled out Correspondence 2024. If there were other mistakes, Martha's system would catch them. There they were. 4 additional letters spanning 6 months each from First Community Bank. April, May, June, August. Each congratulating me on property purchases I'd never made. I spread all 5 letters across Martha's dining table where we'd shared 43 years of meals. The numbers made my head spin. 5 properties. 5 signatures I had never made. Total value, $1.4 million. My hands trembled as I stared at the evidence of a crime I didn't yet understand. Wednesday afternoon brought unexpected company. I was reviewing insurance policies when Lindsay's Honda pulled into my driveway. She stepped out with a white bakery bag, perfectly styled, despite the October breeze. "Harold," she called, letting herself in with her spare key. "I brought apple turnovers from Hanson's." Martha's voice echoed. "People who bring gifts without occasions usually want something." "That's thoughtful," I said, watching her eyes sweep the mail pile on my counter. "What brings you by—" "Can I check on my favorite father-in-law? You've seemed scattered lately." "Scattered? Interesting word choice." "Have I?" "Robert mentioned you've been having confusion with the bank. Those error notices they've been sending—" I hadn't mentioned any error notices to Robert. We'd talked Sunday about his work, nothing more. "Error notices," I tested her. "Those silly mix-ups with property listings. The bank's computer system has issues. I see it constantly at work. Elderly clients getting paperwork for transactions they don't remember making. Elderly clients don't remember making. How do you know about my mail?" Her smile faltered briefly. "Robert said you'd called about confusion. The representative mentioned it in our department meeting. We flagged these cases for follow-up." "Flag these cases, like I was a problem to manage." "Harold, you've seemed forgetful lately. Sunday you asked twice about Robert's promotion. When I mentioned organizing your medications, you seemed confused about which ones you take. I took the same 3 pills every morning at 7 sharp for 5 years. I'd never asked about organizing them, never asked twice about any promotion. I'm not sure what you mean. She patted my hand. There's no shame needing help. We all get older. Things become overwhelming. Maybe it's time to consider simpler living arrangements with less maintenance, such as Robert and I discussed this. Senior communities in Des Moines have independent living with support services. You'd have your own apartment, but help available if needed. What about this house? We'd handle everything. The sale paperwork, moving. Completely stress-free? She squeezed my hand. I've spoken with a real estate agent specializing in estate sales. Estate sales, as if I were already dead. I'm comfortable here. Her expression hardened slightly. Harold, I worry about you alone in this big house. What if you forgot the stove, or... She let implications hang. I manage fine. Of course. Her voice carried patronizing sweetness. But Robert and I think you should be evaluated, just to establish a baseline, for your protection. After she left, I sat in Martha's reading chair, watching her Honda disappear down Oak Street. The turnovers sat untouched. I replayed our conversation. Lindsay had known about bank letters before I told her anything. She'd mentioned error notices property listings confused elderly clients, while pretending to comfort me about supposed forgetfulness. She hadn't come to check on me. She'd come to check on what I knew. Thursday morning found me driving toward Des Moines before dawn. I hadn't told anyone about this trip. Martha's voice guided me. When something smells rotten, don't ignore your nose. Catherine Sullivan and Associates occupied the 7th floor of a downtown glass building. I'd found her name under Elder Law in the directory. Catherine Sullivan was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and intelligent eyes. She listened without interruption as I spread the 5 bank letters across her desk. Mr. Peterson, how long have you been receiving these? 6 months. The first came in April. She turned to her computer. Let's check 1247 Riverside Drive. Her fingers flew across keys. That property exists? Purchased 4 months ago for $320,000. Deed shows your name as owner. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. Here's what's interesting. She clicked through screens. It was immediately leased to Midwest Property Management. Rental income is being deposited into an account at First Community Bank. An account I'm betting you can't access. How can that be? Someone with your personal information and banking relationships can accomplish quite a lot. She pulled up another screen. Elm Street property, also real. Also generating rental income you're not seeing? The room felt smaller. Someone's been buying real estate with my name and collecting rent. Exactly. Harold, this isn't random identity theft. This is sophisticated financial exploitation. Someone has systematically used your identity for months, purchasing income-generating properties and funneling profits elsewhere. She leaned back, studying me. The coordination required the banking access forged documents. This suggests professional operation. Anyone taking unusual interest in your personal information? Family members, financial advisors. Lindsay's face flashed in my mind. Her bank position, her concern about my mental state, her knowledge of letters before I'd mentioned them. My daughter-in-law works at First Community Bank. Catherine's expression sharpened. In what capacity? Loan processing department. She made a note. Harold, is there any possibility you signed these documents and don't remember? No, I may be 68, but my mind is clear. I've never signed anything related to these properties. Then we have a serious crime. She reached for her phone. I'm calling the FBI. This level of sophistication, the multi-property scheme banking involvement, this isn't just identity theft. This is organized financial exploitation, possibly affecting multiple victims. The FBI, Harold, someone created an entire false financial identity for you, purchased over $1 million in real estate, and established ongoing revenue streams. This is federal crime territory. She dialed from memory. Agent Brooks, Catherine Sullivan. I have a case you need to see immediately. After hanging up, she looked at me with admiration. Most people would have thrown those letters away, assumed bank errors, let family handle the confusion. You didn't. You came here. You're fighting back. My wife taught me to pay attention to details. Smart woman. Catherine gathered the letters. Harold, these aren't bank errors. Someone has been systematically stealing your identity for months, and they're making money from it. Her next words hit like ice water. This level of sophistication suggests inside help. Someone at your bank is involved. Thursday afternoon brought me home from Des Moines, with Catherine's words echoing someone at my bank was involved. I parked in my driveway and stared at my house. the same house where Lindsay had used the guest room as her occasional office, claiming it was quieter than their apartment for remote work. Martha's voice guided me. Evidence tells a story if you know how to read it. The guest room door stood slightly ajar. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating Lindsay's makeshift workspace. I'd always respected her privacy, never entering when she worked here. That courtesy ended today. Her laptop sat closed on the small desk, but beside it lay a leather portfolio I'd never noticed before. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were documents, dozens of them. Property appraisals, mortgage applications, and there over and over my signature on papers I'd never seen. But these weren't copies. These looked like originals. I photographed each page with my phone, my hands shaking so badly the first few shots came out blurred. I forced myself to breathe to focus. Martha had taught me to be methodical. Beneath the property documents, I found something that made my blood run cold. A yellow legal pad filled with Lindsay's precise handwriting. The header read, HP Cognitive Decline Documentation. AP Harold Peterson. I read entry after entry, each dated, each describing incidents that had never happened. October 2nd, Harold called bank 3 times about same property, seemed confused each time. September 28th, asked me twice in one conversation about Robert's work schedule. September 15th, forgot he'd already taken his evening medication, nearly took double dose. August 30th, couldn't remember neighbor's name, called him that man next door. Every word was a lie. I remembered each date clearly. Normal days with normal conversations. She was building a fictional record of my mental decline, creating evidence that didn't exist. Below the legal pad, I found printed articles about dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Several passages were highlighted. Early signs often dismissed as normal aging. Family members should document instances of confusion. Legal measures to protect vulnerable seniors. She wasn't just stealing my money. She was stealing my mind, my credibility, my very identity as a competent human being. I photographed everything page by page, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I was replacing the portfolio when I heard the distinctive sound of Lindsay's Honda in the driveway. I flew downstairs, barely managing to grab my gardening gloves and step outside before her key turned in the lock. By the time she rounded the corner of the house, I was kneeling beside Martha's rose bushes, pulling weeds with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "Harold," she called out, her voice bright with false cheer. "I didn't expect to find you gardening so late in the day. Just tidying up." I managed not trusting myself to look directly at her. "Are you feeling all right? You look a bit flushed." I forced myself to meet her eyes. The same eyes that had watched me with concern yesterday, that had spoken of my supposed forgetfulness with such convincing sympathy. Now I saw something different there. Calculation, assessment, the careful observation of a predator watching its prey. "Just tired from the fresh air?" I said. She studied my face for a long moment. "Well, don't overdo it. We wouldn't want you to have another one of your dizzy spells." I'd never had a dizzy spell in my life. Lindsay walked through that door with her perfect smile, but now I saw something different in her eyes. She knew I'd been in her files, and I knew she was building a case to destroy me. Friday morning brought Catherine's urgent call before I'd finished coffee. "Harold, Agent Brooks can see you this morning. She's very interested in your case." I drove to Des Moines. Again, Martha's words echoing, "Sometimes you have to trust strangers more than family." Agent Michelle Brooks met us at the FBI field office. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen too much human greed. "Mr. Peterson," she said, studying photographs from Lindsay's portfolio. "These fabricated diary entries suggest something beyond simple fraud. Someone is systematically building a case for your mental incompetence. That terrifies me most. Not just the money, but making people believe I'm losing my mind." Agent Brooks spread the images across the table. "The sophistication here is remarkable. Forged signatures, detailed psychological manipulation, coordinated timing across multiple properties. This isn't amateur work." She turned to her computer. "Lindsay Parker Peterson. Let me run that through our database." Her expression changed as information appeared. "She has a brother, Justin Parker, Nevada, resident with a record. Check fraud, identity theft. Served 18 months 3 years ago. He's been flagged in similar schemes in Arizona and New Mexico, but prosecutors couldn't make charges stick." My stomach dropped. Similar schemes, always the same pattern. Elderly victims forge documents, property purchases, claims of mental incompetence when victims complain. Based on cases, we've tracked potentially dozens of victims across multiple states. The room felt colder. Organized crime. Harold, what you've uncovered isn't just identity theft. This is a coordinated criminal enterprise targeting elderly victims across state lines. Federal jurisdiction, our priority. She pulled out a folder. We've been tracking these patterns for 2 years. The sophistication suggests family operations, siblings working together. One gets inside access at financial institutions, the other handles technical aspects. Lindsay works at the bank. Exactly. Inside access explains how they've operated undetected. Bank employees access personal information credit, histories, signature cards. They manipulate internal systems, delay investigations, flag complaints as customer confusion. She closed the folder. Harold, we need your help. These criminals are still active, still victimizing people. We can arrest them based on your discoveries, but we need more evidence to dismantle the entire operation. What kind of evidence? Recorded confessions, details about methods, other victims' financial arrangements, information people only share when they think they're safe. Catherine spoke up. You're asking Harold to confront his family while wearing a wire. I'm asking Harold to help stop criminals destroying elderly people's lives across multiple states, but only if he's willing. I thought about the fake diary entries, systematic identity theft other victims Agent Brooks mentioned. What do you need me to do? Agent Brooks reached into her briefcase and pulled out a device smaller than a button. Sunday dinner with your family just became a federal investigation. Are you ready to wear a wire? Saturday evening found me alone preparing Martha's roast chicken for tomorrow's dinner, my hands trembling as I chopped carrots and celery. I remembered happier Sunday dinners when Robert was small, when our biggest worry was the Hawkeyes football game, before everything changed. The phone rang as I seasoned the chicken. Catherine's voice was careful. Harold, are you ready for tomorrow? As ready as a man can be to discover if his son chose money over his father. Remember what we discussed. Let them talk. Let them feel comfortable. Truth reveals itself when people think they're safe. After hanging up, I practiced conversations before the bathroom mirror. Lindsay, I know about the properties. Too direct. I've been having banking concerns. Too weak. How do you confront someone systematically destroying your life while pretending to care? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Old men who ask too many questions get hurt, stop digging, or face consequences. Ice flooded my veins. They knew. Someone was watching, worried enough to threaten me directly. I forwarded the message to Agent Brooks and Catherine. The house felt different tonight, like a stage being set for tomorrow's performance. Every familiar object seemed to watch with expectant eyes. I walked upstairs to our old bedroom, barely entered since Martha passed. Her perfume bottles still sat on the dresser, reading glasses folded beside the lamp. I picked up our wedding photo. 2 young people who believed love conquered everything. Martha, I whispered to her smiling face, tomorrow I find out if our son chose money over his father. I find out if the boy we raised still exists, or if she's taken him too. The silence stretched heavy with 43 years of memories. Martha had always been the strong one, making hard decisions when I wavered. What would she do tomorrow? What would she say to Lindsay, to Robert, to the people who'd invaded our home? I knew the answer. Martha would fight. She'd fight for truth, for dignity, for other victims who had no one to stand up for them. She wouldn't let fear silence her. I won't let you down, I promised her photograph. Whatever happens tomorrow, I won't let them win. Sleep eluded me. I lay in the guest room where Lindsay had worked, where she'd planned my destruction with casual efficiency. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every passing car might be someone watching. At dawn, I rose and made coffee with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Today would bring answers, consequences, possibly the end of my family, as I'd known it. But it would also bring justice for Martha's memory, and for elderly victims who'd been told they were confused, paranoid, losing their minds. Sunday morning arrived with the sound of car doors slamming. Robert and Lindsay were early, and they'd brought someone with them. The mystery guest turned out to be Dr. Mary Phillips, a woman in her 50s carrying a leather briefcase, and the assessing eyes of someone trained to spot cognitive decline. Lindsay made the introductions with practiced smoothness. Dad, this is Dr. Phillips, a geriatric specialist. We thought it might be helpful for you to have a baseline evaluation just for your own peace of mind. Robert stood beside his wife, looking uncomfortable but nodding agreement. Mom always said prevention was better than cure, right, Dad? I felt the small recording device Agent Brooks had given me no bigger than a shirt button taped beneath my collar. Of course. Please everyone sit down. Dinner's almost ready. As we gathered around Martha's dining room table, the same table where we'd shared countless happy meals, Dr. Phillips opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Harold, I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to ask you a few simple questions. Nothing invasive, just to establish how you're managing day-to-day activities. Fire away, I said, serving Martha's roast chicken with steady hands. What year is it? 2024. It's Sunday, October 13th. My name is Harold Peterson. I'm 68 years old, and I live at 1247 Oak Street in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I looked directly at her. Was that what you were going to ask? Lindsay's smile tightened slightly. Dad, there's no need to be defensive. I'm not being defensive. I'm being evaluated against my will in my own home. I turned to Dr. Phillips. Did anyone inform you that I haven't consented to this evaluation, that I have no cognitive complaints, and am here under what amounts to duress? Dr. Phillips looked uncomfortable. Robert said you'd agreed to this. Robert lied. I set down my fork and looked at my son. Just like he lied about me calling the bank confused. Just like Lindsay lied about bank errors. The room went deadly silent. Lindsay, I continued, my voice steady. Why don't you tell Dr. Phillips about the 5 properties that have been purchased in my name over the past 6 months? Properties I never bought, with signatures I never made. Lindsay's face remained perfectly composed, but I saw her hand tighten on her wine glass. Dad, those were bank errors. I told you I'd handle it. Bank errors. All 5 of them. And the rental income from those properties? Where's that money going? Harold, what are you talking about? Robert asked, looking genuinely confused. I stood and walked to the china cabinet where I'd hidden copies of Lindsay's portfolio. I placed them on the table. This is evidence I found in your wife's files. Forged mortgage documents with my signature on papers I've never seen. And this, I pulled out the yellow legal pad, is Lindsay's handwritten diary of false memory episodes she's attributed to me building a case for my incompetence. Robert stared at the documents, his face draining of color. Lindsay stood slowly. You went through my private files. You had no right. They were in my home. Everything in this house belongs to me, including evidence of crimes committed against me. Harold, Dr. Phillips said carefully, these are serious accusations. They are, and I have more. I looked directly at Lindsay. I also know about Gerald Henderson's offshore accounts. The wine glass slipped from Lindsay's hand, shattering on Martha's hardwood floor. Her face went white as paper. How did you... She started, then caught herself. Gerald promised this was foolproof, didn't he, Lindsay? She began to shake. You don't understand. You're confused. Gerald Henderson is your inside man at First Community Bank. He's been receiving payments for 7 years to cover up your fraud schemes. $340,000 to be exact. Robert was staring at his wife with an expression I'd never seen before, horror mixed with dawning understanding. Lindsay, he whispered, is this true? She turned on him with sudden fury. You stupid fool! Did you think we could afford that house on your engineering salary? Did you think your father's little pension was going to take care of everyone? So you decided to steal it, I said quietly. Gerald got his cut. She screamed, all pretense finally shattered. $340,000 over 7 years. He protected us from inside the bank. He flagged complaints as customer confusion. He approved the loans. Without Gerald covering for us, we never could have... The front door burst open. Agent Brooks entered with 3 other federal agents, weapons drawn. Lindsay Parker Peterson. Agent Brooks announced, You're under arrest for bank fraud, identity theft, elder financial exploitation, and conspiracy. Lindsay's face twisted into something ugly as they approached with handcuffs. You stupid old man, Gerald Henderson made this possible. The whole system was ours. We had judges, bank executives, real estate agents. You've destroyed everything. As they handcuffed her, she lunged toward me. This house should have been ours. You don't deserve it. You're nothing but a useless old... Robert caught her holding her back as she screamed obscenities that made Dr. Phillips gasp. Agent Brooks spoke into her radio. Send the team to First Community Bank. We have probable cause for Gerald Henderson. Monday morning brought news vans lined up on Oak Street and my phone ringing every 30 seconds. The headline on every major network was the same: First Community Bank VP arrested in elder fraud scheme. I stood at Martha's kitchen window, watching reporters set up cameras on my front lawn, and remembered her favorite saying, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." Catherine arrived before 8, carrying newspapers and wearing the satisfied expression of a lawyer who'd just won a major case. "Harold, your front page news. Henderson was arrested at his office this morning trying to shred documents. The FBI found evidence of 18 victims across 3 states. 18 people. 18 elderly victims who'd been told they were confused, paranoid, declining. My stomach churned thinking about the others who might never have fought back. By noon, First Community Bank's stock had plummeted 30%. CEO Margaret Winters called an emergency press conference with me standing beside her as the media cameras rolled. First Community Bank failed these victims. Winters said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We will make this right and ensure it never happens again." The questions came fast and sharp. How long had this been happening? How many employees were involved? What safeguards had failed? I found myself speaking into microphones, telling the story of those first mysterious letters, of Lindsay's manipulation of the fake diary entries, designed to make me question my own sanity. Elder fraud isn't just about money, I told the assembled reporters. It's about stealing dignity, independence, and peace of mind. When someone tells an elderly person they're confused or forgetful, we're trained to believe them. We're taught to be polite, to defer to authority. That makes us perfect victims. The phone calls started immediately. Elderly people from across Iowa, then across the country, sharing their own stories. Bank errors that weren't errors. Family members suggesting assisted living. Sudden concerns about mental capacity. Within a week, 12 more victims had come forward with evidence of Henderson's involvement. The FBI expanded their investigation to include 3 other states, where similar patterns had emerged. Margaret Winters visited my home personally with the settlement offer. $12 million in a victim compensation fund. Full restitution for all documented losses. A public apology and acknowledgement of the bank's failures and oversight. "Mr. Peterson," she said, sitting in Martha's living room, "I want you to know that Gerald Henderson has been terminated, and we're cooperating fully with federal prosecutors. We're also implementing new safeguards to prevent this from ever happening again." What about the other victims? The ones who might not have the resources to fight back. Every case Henderson touched is being reviewed. We're reaching out to potential victims, proactively offering free legal assistance and full restitution, regardless of whether they pursue criminal charges. The media attention continued for weeks. I gave interviews to local news stations, national networks, even a documentary crew interested in elder fraud prevention. My story became a cautionary tale, a success story, a rallying cry for elderly rights. But as I watched the coverage from Martha's old chair, I realized this victory came with a price I hadn't fully considered. I'd saved my home and dignity, but lost my family in the process. Robert had called once since Sunday dinner, his voice hollow with shame. "Dad, I don't know how to face you. I don't know how to make this right." Lindsay was in federal custody awaiting trial. Henderson had been denied bail after attempting to flee the country. Justin Parker was arrested in Nevada, the same day caught trying to liquidate shell company assets. The house felt too quiet now, too empty. Martha's photos seemed to watch me with sad eyes, understanding the cost of justice. I'd fought for truth and won, but victory tasted bitter when it meant losing the son I'd raised the family dinners. I'd treasured the simple belief that blood meant loyalty. But as I watched the news coverage, I realized this victory came with a price. I'd saved my home and dignity, but lost my family in the process. 3 months later, Robert knocked on my door alone, holding white lilies, Martha's favorite flowers, for visiting her grave. Spring was showing itself in Cedar Falls. Martha's daffodils pushed through soil she'd tended so carefully, signs of renewal life continuing despite winter's harsh grip. "Dad," Robert said, his voice barely a whisper, "I brought flowers for Mom. I hoped maybe we could visit her together." I studied my son's face. He looked older, worn down by months of shame. The confident engineer who'd stood beside Lindsay was gone, replaced by a man who'd learned life's hardest lesson. "Come in." We sat in Martha's living room, where she'd taught Robert to tie shoes, where we'd celebrated his graduation, where I'd told him about her cancer. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. "Dad, I don't know how to begin apologizing. Start with the truth. Help me understand how my son could believe I was losing my mind." Robert's hand shook. It was so gradual. Lindsay would mention little things, How you'd repeated yourself seemed confused about dates. She'd show me articles about dementia signs, suggest we watch for symptoms. And you believed her. She was so convincing. She'd say, "I'm worried about your father," with such genuine concern. When you called the bank, she told me you'd been calling repeatedly, getting agitated. She made it sound like you were becoming paranoid. I remembered Martha's wisdom about manipulation, how dangerous lies were wrapped in love and concern. She isolated me from you, Robert continued, tears streaming. Every conversation she was there, interpreting your words, explaining your behavior. I stopped trusting my own judgment about my own father. Robert Lindsay is a professional. This is what she does. She's perfected these techniques on elderly victims across multiple states. You're not the first son she's turned against his father. But I should have known better. Son, I've decided to use the settlement money for an education program. Help families recognize elder exploitation signs. Teach how these criminals operate. Robert wiped his eyes. That's exactly what Mom would have done. Your mother said our experiences should teach others. Maybe this nightmare can prevent other families being destroyed. Dad, how do I earn back your trust? I looked at this man I'd raised who'd made a terrible mistake, but had courage to face it. You start by being here, by showing up, by rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. Can we start having Sunday dinners again, just us? I'd like that, but no more secrets, Robert. No more secrets, he promised. That afternoon, we drove to Graceland Cemetery, where Martha rested beneath her chosen oak tree. Robert placed lilies on her headstone while I told her everything. The fraud investigation coming trial, and, most importantly, that her son had come home. Standing in spring sunshine, I realized something profound. I'd spent months proving I wasn't losing my mind, wasn't becoming weak. But the real victory wasn't in courtrooms or bank settlements. The real victory was standing here with my son, both older and wiser, ready to rebuild what had been broken. We drove home in comfortable silence, planning our first Sunday dinner in months. No evaluations, no hidden agendas, no one questioning my mental capacity. Just father and son sharing a meal Martha would have loved. That evening I called Catherine to discuss the education fund details. Other families needed to know the warning signs, needed to understand that elder fraud wasn't just about money. It was about stealing dignity, independence, peace of mind. As I prepared for bed in the house I'd fought to keep, I looked at Martha's photograph on my nightstand. We did it, I whispered. We saved our home, our dignity, and our son. Age isn't about becoming weak or forgotten. It's about becoming wise enough to fight back when someone tries to make you invisible. Looking back at this true story, I realize how close I came to losing everything. My home savings and identity. If I hadn't trusted my instincts when everyone said I was confused, Lindsay's criminal network would have succeeded. My advice: don't be like I almost was. Don't let politeness become weakness. When something feels wrong, it probably is, regardless of who's telling you otherwise. God gave us instincts for a reason, and we must listen, even when family suggests we're declining. The hardest lesson from this true story elder fraud isn't just about money. It's about stealing dignity, independence, and peace of mind. These criminals weaponize our good manners against us. For other grandpa stories like mine, remember that age brings wisdom, not weakness. God blessed us with decades of experience. That's our greatest defense against exploitation. Trust yourself first, always. This experience taught me that sometimes closest family become greatest threats. But courage doesn't diminish with age. It grows stronger. God's protection came through my determination to seek truth, even when confronting painful family realities. Grandpa's stories often focus on the past, but mine is about fighting for the future. Don't let anyone convince you that confusion is normal just because you're older. Your mind is sharp, your instincts valid, your voice matters. Most important lesson when facing true story situations like mine: document everything. Trust professional. Help over family pressure. And remember that wisdom and determination triumph over manipulation with divine guidance. Fellow survivors, know our greatest victory isn't just protecting assets. It's proving that experience can overcome greed and deception. Now I want to hear from you. Have you, or someone you know, faced elder fraud attempts? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of courage and justice. Together, we can protect our community's most vulnerable members. When I unfolded that crumpled piece of paper, my daughter-in-law Alice secretly slipped into my hand. I never imagined those 5 desperate words would save my life. Pretend you're sick. Leave immediately. I stared at her in confusion as she frantically shook her head, begging me with her eyes to trust her. It was only later that I discovered why, and that truth would completely change how I viewed my own family. Before I reveal what happened that morning, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. That Saturday morning in Brookhaven started like any other weekend in my comfortable Atlanta suburb. I was standing at the kitchen counter measuring coffee grounds for my usual morning brew when Alice appeared in the doorway. My daughter-in-law looked pale, almost ghostly, her hands trembling as she approached. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, noting the worry lines creasing her 28-year-old face. "You're up early for a Saturday." Alice glanced nervously toward the hallway before stepping closer. Without a word, she pressed a small folded piece of paper into my palm. Her eyes were wide with fear, silently pleading with me to read it. I unfolded the note written in Alice's hurried handwriting. "Pretend you're sick. Leave now." Before I could ask what this meant, Paul's voice echoed from the stairway. "Morning, Dad. Beautiful day, isn't it?" My 35-year-old son entered the kitchen, straightening his business casual shirt. He'd been under stress lately, taking phone calls at odd hours, speaking in hushed tones behind closed doors. I'd attributed it to work pressure. "What are you two whispering about?" Paul asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as he studied Alice's anxious expression. "Nothing important," I replied automatically, but Alice grabbed my arm. "Please," she whispered urgently, "trust me." Something in her desperate tone made my decision. I pressed my hand to my forehead dramatically. "Actually, Paul, I'm feeling a bit dizzy. Might be my blood pressure acting up again." Paul's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something I couldn't identify crossing his features. "Are you sure you're okay, Dad? Maybe you should rest." "I think I need some fresh air," I said, reaching for my car keys. "Alice, would you mind driving me to get some medicine?" 20 minutes later, we sat in my Honda in the parking lot of Piedmont Park, Alice's hands still shaking as she began to speak. "Anthony, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need you to believe me." She took a shuddering breath. "Last night, around 2 in the morning, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs for water and heard Paul on the phone in his office. My chest tightened. "What did you hear?" "He was talking about you, about this morning." Alice's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said, the old man drinks his coffee at exactly 9:30 every Saturday. The symptoms should start within an hour. By 10:30, it'll look like a heart attack. Natural causes." The words hit me like ice water. "Alice, that can't be right. There's more." She pulled out her phone, showing me photographs of bank statements. "Paul owes $450,000 to some very dangerous people. Gambling debts, Anthony. He's desperate." I stared at the numbers, my engineering mind trying to process this information logically. But how would killing me solve his debt problems? Alice's next words made my heart sink into my stomach. "Your life insurance policy, $750,000. He took it out 6 months ago, remember? Said it was to protect the family. The policy I'd signed without reading, carefully trusting my son completely. Now the memory felt like a betrayal of my own common sense. But Alice, even if what you're saying is true, how do you know all this?" She swiped to more photographs on her phone. "Because I've been watching him, Anthony. These are pictures of bank statements from an account you don't know about. He's been transferring money from your savings for months. Small amounts so you wouldn't notice. The evidence was undeniable. Transaction after transaction totaling $280,000 of my retirement savings moved to an account bearing only Paul's name. My own son had been systematically robbing me while planning my murder. Dad, he's not just planning to kill you," Alice said, her voice breaking. "He's been stealing from you for months." The weight of Alice's words hit me as we sat in the Honda. My engineering background kicked in. I needed to approach this like solving a complex problem, not panic like a victim. "Alice, if we go to police with just your testimony and these photos, what happens?" She met my eyes grimly. "Paul will say I doctored them. He'll claim I'm unstable, maybe even that I'm the one stealing." I nodded. My son had always been persuasive. He'd convinced me to sign that insurance policy, give him account access for easier management. How long had he been planning this? "We need physical proof," I said, shifting into problem-solving mode. "Something that can't be explained away." "The poison," Alice replied immediately. "If he's using it this morning, it's in the house. Plus more financial documents, maybe communications with his creditors. I checked my phone, 9:15. According to Alice's timeline, I should be drinking poisoned coffee in 15 minutes. You know his office layout. Where would he hide poison? Locked desk drawer, thinks I don't know about it. And a filing cabinet behind his computer with private business papers. My phone buzzed. Dad, where did you go? I'm worried about you. He's panicking, I showed Alice. We don't have much time. But how do we search without him knowing? I started the engine. We need a distraction. Driving back to Brookhaven, I studied my neighborhood with new eyes. These safe tree-lined streets suddenly felt different, knowing my son was planning murder behind one of these perfect facades. Look, Alice pointed as we turned onto my street. 3 unfamiliar cars sat in my driveway. Through the front window, Paul gestured animatedly to men in business suits. His Saturday meeting, I remembered. Some investment opportunity. Alice's face brightened. Perfect. When Paul's in business mode, he hates interruptions, especially from family. I parked 2 houses down to observe. The men looked serious professional, demanding Paul's full attention. Here's the plan. I said, my mind working like a blueprint. I go in front, join their meeting. Play the concerned father, feeling better interested in Paul's ventures. Keep him occupied. I'll use the back door, Alice added. I know where he hides the spare key. We sat quietly, understanding the magnitude of our plan. If Paul caught us searching his papers, if he realized we knew, Alice, if something goes wrong, if he suspects anything, run. Don't worry about me, just get out and call police. She squeezed my hand. We'll find the proof, Anthony. We have to. Through the window, Paul laughed, with his guests playing the successful businessman perfectly. The same charm he'd used to manipulate me for months. I checked my watch. We have maybe 30 minutes while he's busy. If we're going to do this, it has to be now. The familiar warmth of my own home felt alien as I stepped through the front door, knowing what I now knew about my son. The sound of animated conversation drifted from the living room, where Paul's voice carried that confident tone he used when trying to impress potential investors. Gentlemen, I announced, entering the room with what I hoped looked like a recovering man's cautious optimism. I'm feeling much better. Don't mind me, I'm just curious about Paul's latest venture. Paul's head snapped toward me, surprise flickering across his features before his practiced smile returned. Dad, you look better. Are you sure you should be up? Fresh air worked wonders, I replied, settling into my favorite armchair. Please continue. I'd love to hear about this investment opportunity. The 3 businessmen, expensive suits, serious expressions, briefcases at their feet, nodded politely. One of them, a silver-haired man with sharp eyes, resumed his presentation about market projections and capital requirements. I made appropriate sounds of interest while my heart hammered against my ribs. Through the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Alice moving along the side of the house toward the back door, staying low beneath the windows. For 20 minutes, I played the interested father, asking questions about profit margins and timelines, while Alice worked upstairs. The investors seemed impressed with Paul's answers, but I noticed my son's growing distraction, the way his eyes kept drifting toward the ceiling toward his office. Meanwhile, Alice had slipped through the back entrance and navigated to Paul's office. Her hands shaking, she'd systematically searched his desk, finding the unmarked amber vial hidden in the locked bottom drawer. She'd photographed financial documents showing systematic transfers from my accounts correspondence about gambling debts. And most damning of all, Paul's handwritten murder timeline. Saturday planned coffee at 9:30 a.m. Symptoms begin 10 Dalajro. Call 911 at 10:45. Too late for intervention. Actually, gentlemen, I said, checking my watch and seeing Alice's signal from the hallway. A quick thumbs up indicating she'd found what we needed. I'm starting to feel a bit tired again. Would you mind if I went upstairs to rest? This has been fascinating, but I don't want to overdo it. Paul's expression shifted slightly. Of course, Dad. You should take it easy. Don't let me interrupt your meeting, I said, standing slowly. I'll just be upstairs if you need anything. The investors murmured understanding words about recovery and rest as I made my way toward the staircase. But instead of going to my bedroom, I slipped quietly into Paul's office where Alice was just finishing photographing the last document. Did you get everything? I whispered. She nodded, showing me the images on her phone. The poison vial, the financial records, the murder timeline. This is enough to prove everything. We stood there for a moment, both understanding that we now held evidence that could save my life and put Paul in prison. But as we prepared to leave the office, we heard Paul's voice from downstairs closer to the stairway than before. "I'll just check on my father quickly," he was saying to his guests. "Make yourselves comfortable." Alice and I froze as footsteps began climbing the stairs. We'd been in the office longer than planned, and Paul's suspicion had finally overcome his business focus. "He's coming," Alice breathed. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, paused, then began moving deliberately toward the office. There was nowhere to hide, no back exit, no explanation that would satisfy Paul if he found us together surrounded by his private papers. The office door, which we'd left slightly ajar, began to swing open wider. "What the hell are you two doing in here?" Paul stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury as he took in the scene, his father and daughter-in-law standing beside his open desk drawer, Alice's phone still in her hand. The evidence of his crimes spread across his workspace. The silence that followed Paul's question felt like a death sentence. His eyes moved from Alice's phone to the open desk drawer, to the scattered papers, taking in every detail of our search with calculating precision. "I was looking for aspirin," Alice said, her voice remarkably steady. "Anthony had another headache, and I thought you might have some in your desk." Paul's laugh was cold, humorless. "In my locked drawer with my private business documents, spread all over the desk." His gaze fell on the damaged drawer lock, the small screwdriver Alice had dropped in her haste. And with my office door lock jimmied open, I stepped forward, trying to draw his attention from Alice. "Son, we were just—" "Shut up." The venom in his voice made me flinch. This wasn't the Paul I'd raised, the charming businessman who'd been entertaining investors downstairs. This was someone else entirely. "Both of you move. Now." Paul stepped aside, gesturing toward the hallway. "We're going to have a little family meeting somewhere more secure." "Paul, please," Alice began. "Move." His voice cracked like a whip, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. Down the hall, the master bedroom. Now, we had no choice. Paul followed close behind as we walked toward my bedroom, his presence like a predator stalking prey. From downstairs, I could hear the confused murmur of his business partners, wondering what was taking so long. "Inside," Paul ordered, pushing us through the bedroom doorway. Unlike his office, this door was solid with a heavy lock that had never been tampered with. "Paul, what are you doing?" I asked, but he was already backing toward the door. "Cleaning up your mess?" He said, his voice eerily calm. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into, either of you." The door slammed shut, and I heard the unmistakable sound of the key turning in the lock. "Paul," I pounded on the solid wood. Paul opened this door, but his footsteps were already moving away back toward the stairs. A few minutes later, his voice drifted up from the living room, smooth and apologetic. "Gentlemen, I'm terribly sorry, but we've had a family emergency. My father's taken a turn for the worse, and I need to handle some personal matters. Could we reschedule for next week?" Alice was examining the door, testing the handle, checking the hinges. "It's solid," she whispered, "and he has the only key." The bedroom overlooked the backyard, a 15-foot drop to the lawn below. Through the window, I watched Paul's investors loading into their cars, shaking their heads with disappointment. "The window," Alice said, moving toward it. "It's our only way out." I looked down at the drop. "Alice, that's too dangerous." "Not if we make a rope." She was already pulling at the heavy curtains, testing their strength. "Help me with these." Working together, we pulled down the thick drapes and stripped the sheets from the bed. Alice's fingers moved quickly, tying knots with surprising expertise. "Girl Scout training," she explained, seeing my surprised expression. "Some skills you never forget." Our makeshift rope was crude but strong. Alice tested each knot, then secured one end to the heavy oak dresser that had belonged to my grandfather. "You go first," I said. "No, you're heavier. If it holds you, it'll hold me." From downstairs, Paul's voice carried up. Urgent phone conversations, planning something. I swung my legs over the windowsill, gripping the improvised rope. The descent was terrifying. The sheets stretched under my weight, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought they might tear. But Alice's knots held, and I dropped the final few feet onto the soft grass. Alice followed quickly, her athletic build, making the climb look almost easy. As soon as her feet touched ground, we heard Paul's voice from somewhere in the house. "Going somewhere." We ran, through the backyard, over the low fence, into the neighbor's property, across their lawn, toward the street, where my Honda waited. Behind us, Paul's furious shouts echoed through the quiet neighborhood. I fumbled with the keys as Alice threw herself into the passenger seat. The engine turned over just as Paul burst through the front door, his face twisted with rage. "Drive!" Alice shouted. I floored the accelerator tires, squealing as we shot down the residential street. In the rearview mirror, Paul was running toward his BMW phone pressed to his ear. The chase through Atlanta's suburbs was a nightmare of screeching tires and near misses. Paul drove like a man possessed, ramming our bumper at red lights, trying to force us off the road. This wasn't the careful, calculating son I thought I knew. This was pure violence unleashed. We finally lost him in the crowded parking lot of Lenox Square Mall, ducking between parked cars until his BMW disappeared from sight. Sitting in the mall parking garage, both of us shaking with adrenaline, Alice checked her phone. The photos are still here, all of them. But even as relief washed over me, I knew this was far from over. Paul was out there planning his next move. Sitting in the mall parking garage, I felt the weight of our situation. We had evidence, but Paul had credibility and a lifetime of building the perfect son image. Alice, Paul isn't giving up. He's going to spin this, make us look like the criminals. She nodded, clutching her phone. He's probably already making calls, setting up his version. I scrolled through my contacts. Stephen Clark. We went to Georgia Tech together. He's a criminal defense attorney now, one of Atlanta's best. Stephen answered immediately. Anthony. This is unexpected. Stephen, I need urgent help. My son is trying to kill me, and I can prove it. Pause. Are you serious? Dead serious. Can we meet at your office? I think Paul's about to turn this against us. Come now. Peachtree Center, 15th floor. Downtown Stephen's corner office commanded Atlanta's skyline. He listened intently as I explained our morning from hell. Show me the evidence. Alice handed over her phone. Stephen studied each photo with professional detachment. Poison vial, financial documents, Paul's murder timeline. His expression grew serious. This is substantial, but Anthony, if Paul is as calculating as you describe, he's not sitting idle. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Garcia, Officer Pierce, Atlanta PD. We've received a concerning call about your welfare. Your son Paul is very worried. My blood chilled. Officer, I'm fine. I'm with my attorney. We'd like to do a welfare check. Where are you? Stephen was already reaching for his phone. Peachtree Center. We'll be right there. Your son is concerned about your mental state and some behavior from your daughter-in-law. The line died. Stephen spoke rapidly to someone about police procedures and client rights. They're coming, I told Alice. Paul contacted them first. What did he say? Probably that I'm having a breakdown, that you're manipulating me. He's flipping the script. 20 minutes later, 2 officers entered with Paul. My son looked perfectly concerned. Disheveled, worried, the picture of devoted family dealing with crisis. Dad, he moved to embrace me, but I stepped back. His hurt expression looked genuine enough to fool anyone. Officers! Stephen interjected. I'm Stephen Clark, Mr. Garcia's attorney. Perhaps we could discuss this in a formal setting. Officer Pierce looked between Paul and me. Sir, your son called because he's concerned. He says you've been acting erratically, and your daughter-in-law might be influencing you inappropriately. Paul's performance was flawless. Dad's been having memory issues. Alice has been taking advantage of his condition. This morning they disappeared, and I found evidence someone broke into my office. That's a lie, Alice said quietly, but lacked Paul's confident authority. Officers, Stephen said, this requires more investigation than a welfare check. I suggest we all go to the station for proper legal proceedings. Pierce nodded. That's best. We can sort this out there. Walking toward elevators, Paul fell beside me. Dad, I'm just trying to help. I love you. Loud enough for officers to hear. The words made my skin crawl, but I saw their effect. Paul was building his case with every gesture, every concerned glance, every perfectly timed expression of devotion. Standing at Atlanta Police Department entrance, I realized we were walking into Paul's trap. The battle for credibility was about to begin. The interview room at Atlanta Police Department felt like a courtroom where my life hung in the balance. Detective Pierce, a weathered man with sharp eyes, spread Alice's phone photos across the metal table like cards in a deadly game. Mrs. Garcia, he said, studying the images, these could be pictures of anything. A medicine bottle business, documents, personal notes. Paul leaned forward with practiced sincerity. Detective, my father has been having memory issues lately. Alice has been... Well, I hate to say this about family, but I believe she's been manipulating him financially. That's not true, Alice said firmly. Detective, I can tell you exactly where that poison is hidden. Paul's desk bottom drawer behind the insurance papers. It's an amber vial, unmarked, containing clear liquid. Paul's confident smile faltered slightly. She could have put it there herself. This morning I found my office ransacked. She had plenty of opportunity to plant evidence. Detective Pierce examined the photo of Paul's handwritten timeline. Mr. Garcia, this appears to be your handwriting. Can you explain this schedule? Business notes, Paul replied smoothly. I was planning a presentation timeline for my investors. Alice is misinterpreting everything through the lens of her delusions. Stephen Clark spoke up. Detective, my client is making very specific claims. She's describing exact locations, specific substances. If she's lying, a search will expose that immediately. And if she's telling the truth, I added, finding my voice, then my son has been planning to murder me for insurance money. Detective Pierce studied us all carefully. Mrs. Garcia, you're claiming there's arsenic in an unmarked vial in Mr. Paul Garcia's desk drawer. Yes, and financial documents showing he's stolen $280,000 from Anthony's accounts, plus correspondence about gambling debts totaling $450,000. Paul's composure cracked slightly. This is ridiculous. You're going to take the word of a woman who clearly... Mr. Garcia, Detective Pierce interrupted. If your daughter-in-law is making false accusations, you shouldn't object to us verifying her claims. The silence stretched taut. Paul's jaw worked as he calculated his options. Fine, he said finally. Search away. You'll find nothing but business documents and maybe some antacid tablets. Detective Pierce made a call. Judge Morrison. Detective Pierce, I need an emergency search warrant. He read Alice's specific claims into the phone, including exact locations and descriptions. 30 minutes later, his phone rang. Pierce here. He listened intently, his expression growing more serious. You found what, where, exactly... Another pause. And the lab results. He hung up and looked directly at Paul. Mr. Garcia, my team found an unmarked amber vial in your desk drawer, exactly where Mrs. Garcia described. The contents tested positive for arsenic compound. Paul's face went white. That's impossible. Someone planted it. They also found the financial documents Mrs. Garcia photographed, showing systematic transfers from your father's accounts to a secret account under your name only. I can explain. And this. Detective Pierce held up an evidence bag containing a piece of paper. Your handwritten schedule detailing the timing of your father's planned death down to the minute. Paul stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You don't understand. I'm drowning in debt. Those people I owe money to, they're not patient. They're not reasonable. Paul, Stephen warned, but my son was beyond hearing. I didn't want to kill him. Paul's voice cracked. But I had no choice. $450,000. Do you know what they do to people who can't pay? Detective Pierce was already reaching for his handcuffs. Mr. Garcia, you have the right to remain silent. He was supposed to die, Paul screamed, pointing at me. It was supposed to look natural. A heart attack. No one would have questioned it. His mask had completely fallen away, revealing the desperate, dangerous man beneath. I needed that insurance money. The room fell silent except for Paul's ragged breathing. In that moment, I saw my son clearly for the first time. Not the charming businessman, not the devoted family man, but a cold-blooded killer who had been planning my death with the same methodical precision he once applied to his homework. Paul Garcia, Detective Pierce said, snapping the handcuffs into place. You're under arrest for attempted murder fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. As they led Paul away, still ranting about his debts and his desperation, I felt a strange mixture of relief and profound sadness. Justice was being served, but the son I thought I knew had never really existed at all. The days following Paul's arrest blurred together in a haze of police interviews, legal consultations, and the gradual realization that my son's crimes ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Detective Pierce called me 3 days after the arrest. Mr. Garcia, we need to talk. Our investigation into Paul's finances has uncovered some disturbing patterns. In his office, Pierce spread out documents like pieces of a horrifying puzzle. Your son's first wife, Rebecca, died 18 months ago, officially ruled a heart attack. My stomach dropped. But she was only 32, healthy. That's what caught our attention. Same age range as you, same insurance payout structure, same mysterious financial troubles beforehand. Pierce pulled out more files. We've requested an exhumation. The forensics results came back a week later. Rebecca Garcia had died from arsenic poisoning administered over several weeks to mimic a gradual heart condition. The same methodical approach Paul had planned for me. There's more, Pierce continued. Paul's internet search history shows extensive research into untraceable poisons, symptoms of heart attacks, and insurance claim procedures. This goes back 8 months. Stephen Clark guided us through the legal maze that followed. Paul attempted to negotiate a plea bargain claiming temporary insanity brought on by gambling addiction. The prosecution refused. 2 premeditated murders, Stephen explained. The evidence is overwhelming. They're seeking life without parole. The trial began 6 months later. Taking the witness stand was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Looking at Paul across that courtroom, my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, helped with homework, celebrated graduations with, knowing he'd planned my death with such cold calculation. "Mr. Garcia," the prosecutor asked gently, "did you notice any warning signs in your son's behavior?" I thought I was being a good father," I said, my voice barely steady. "He asked for help with Bill's access to accounts for easier management. I trusted him completely. I never imagined—" My voice broke. Alice's testimony was even more powerful. Despite Paul's attempts to intimidate her from the defendant's table, cold stares, whispered threats during breaks, she presented the evidence with unwavering clarity. "I heard him laughing on that phone call," she told the jury, "planning my father-in-law's death like it was a business transaction. When I realized what he intended to do, I knew I had to act." The community impact was profound. Other families came forward with similar stories. Adult children with gambling problems, sudden requests for insurance policies, elderly parents experiencing mysterious health issues. Paul's case became a cautionary tale that saved lives. Dr. Linda Foster, who'd been treating Paul's gambling addiction, testified about his escalating desperation. He spoke of his debts as a death sentence, said he'd do anything to escape them. The prosecution painted a picture of a man who transformed love into a weapon, using family trust to commit the ultimate betrayal. Paul's defense team argued addiction and desperation, but the premeditated nature of both murders made their case impossible. During closing arguments, I watched Paul's face. Gone was any trace of the charming businessman or devoted son. He sat stone-faced, occasionally scribbling notes, showing no remorse for Rebecca's death or his plans for mine. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On the charge of murder in the first degree in the death of Rebecca Garcia, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree of Anthony Garcia, we find the defendant guilty. On the charges of fraud and conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Paul showed no emotion as the judge sentenced him to life without possibility of parole. As the bailiff led him away, he looked at me one final time. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just cold calculation, even in defeat. Outside the courthouse, Alice and I stood in the Atlanta sunshine, feeling something we hadn't experienced in over a year. Safety. "It's over," she said simply. Yes, I agreed. "It's finally over." Stephen joined us on the courthouse steps. "You both showed incredible courage. Paul will never hurt anyone again." The media coverage sparked a national conversation about elder abuse, family financial manipulation, and the warning signs of domestic predators. Our story became part of training materials for social workers and police departments. But for Alice and me, the most important outcome was simpler. We could finally begin to heal. 1 year later, Anthony had learned to trust again. The morning sun streamed through our new home in Decatur as Alice and I sat at breakfast. Exactly 1 year since 5 words on crumpled paper had saved my life. "Do you ever think about it?" Alice asked. "How different things would be if I hadn't written that note." I pulled the faded paper from my wallet. "Pretend you're sick. Leave now." Every day, I admitted. Our smaller home felt infinitely larger than the Brookhaven house. No shadows of deception here, just genuine warmth between 2 people who'd survived the unthinkable together. Alice had transformed completely. The frightened woman who'd slipped me that desperate warning now volunteered with Atlanta Elder Abuse Prevention Coalition, helping other families recognize warning signs. "Another call yesterday," she said. "A woman in Marietta. Her son-in-law's asking about insurance policies wanting account access. She remembered our story. You helped her, gave her Detective Pierce's number and a good attorney's name. She won't be another statistic." That was Alice now, turning our nightmare into protection for others. The scared daughter-in-law, who once whispered kitchen warnings, now spoke confidently to police departments and community groups across Georgia. My own healing had been slower. Paul's betrayal had shattered my understanding of family, But Alice's unwavering loyalty, her courage facing mortal danger, taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who stands with you when everything falls apart. We'd become regular speakers at community centers. The response was always the same shocked recognition, then grateful tears from people seeing their own situations reflected in ours. The original note sat framed beside my bed, now a daily reminder of how quickly life changes and how much courage exists in unlikely places. Alice, barely 30, had risked everything to save a man who wasn't her biological father. She'd become the daughter I'd never had and the hero I'd never expected. "You know what I think about most," Alice said. "How many people are living with their own version of Paul? Charming outside, calculating inside, waiting for the right moment. That's why we keep telling our story, so they know they're not alone. And so they know sometimes the bravest thing you can do is hand someone a piece of paper that says, 'Leave now.'" We sat in peaceful morning light, two survivors who'd found family in unlikely circumstances. The trauma would always be part of our story, but no longer defined us. We'd transformed Paul's attempt to destroy our lives into a mission to save others. Dr. Foster said, "Our willingness to help others accelerated our healing. You've turned pain into purpose. That's the strongest recovery." Looking at Alice, my daughter-in-law, friend, hero, I felt overwhelming gratitude for those 5 words that changed everything. Love hadn't been Paul's carefully constructed manipulation. It had been a desperate scribbled note from someone brave enough to risk everything for truth. The note remained our most precious possession, not for the paper itself, but for what it represented. The moment when love conquered fear, when courage defeated calculation, when family meant more than blood. In the end, salvation came not from elaborate plans or professional help, but from 5 simple words written by someone who cared enough to act when action meant everything. Looking back at this true story, I realize how blind I was to the warning signs. Don't be like me. Don't ignore your instincts when something feels wrong about a family member's behavior. I trusted completely without questioning, and that nearly cost me my life. Grandpa, stories like mine aren't meant to scare you, but to open your eyes. When someone suddenly shows interest in your finances, insurance policies, or health conditions, pay attention. When they isolate you from other family members, or make you dependent on them alone, that's a red flag. God protected me through Alice's courage that morning. The Lord works through people who care enough to risk everything for truth. I believe the Almighty guided her to write those 5 life-saving words when I couldn't see the danger myself. The hardest lesson from this true story is that evil can wear the most familiar faces. Your own child, the person you raised and loved unconditionally, can become your greatest threat. But Grandpa's stories teach us that wisdom comes from experience, even painful ones. Don't ignore financial irregularities or brush off suspicious behavior as family helping family. Trust your gut when something doesn't add up. And most importantly, listen to the people who truly love you, even when what they're telling you seems impossible to believe. God gave me a second chance at life and a deeper understanding of real family bonds. Through His grace, Alice and I found strength to turn our trauma into protection for others. The Lord uses our darkest moments to create light for those still trapped in dangerous situations. This Grandpa Stories experience taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands with you when everything falls apart. Don't make my mistake of blind trust. Stay alert, ask questions, and never be ashamed to seek help when something feels wrong. If this story opened your eyes or reminded you to trust your instincts, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Your engagement helps these important stories reach more people who need them. Together, we can protect our families from hidden dangers.